Chosen one, listen to me carefully. What I am about to share is not for everyone. This message is urgent and it is sacred. If you are not walking the divine path, if you are not truly seeking God, this is not for you. Only those who are chosen, only those whose spirit resonates with God's voice will feel compelled to stay. If you are still here, it is not an accident. This message has reached you at the exact moment your soul needed it. Not early, not late, perfectly timed by God. There is a moment in every chosen one's life when God says, enough struggling, enough resisting. This is that moment. Chosen one, it is now or never. You have reached the point where you must finally give in, not to weakness, but to God's will. What you have been holding back, what you have been fighting internally, can no longer be delayed. If you stay with me until the end, you will understand why everything you went through was necessary, and why peace has been feeling just out of reach until now. This message will change how you see your struggle, your faith, and yourself. Before we continue, chosen ones, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon so you never miss a divine message, and share this with other chosen ones who need this word today. And comment 777 in the comments to declare that you are aligned, ready, and willing to follow God's direction. Now breathe. Let's begin. Section 2. The inner war you've been fighting. Chosen one, I need you to understand something very important right now. The exhaustion you have been feeling is not physical. It is spiritual. It is emotional. It comes from a long, silent war that has been happening inside you. A war most people around you will never see and never understand. You have been fighting yourself for a long time. On one side of you is faith. On the other side is control. On one side is trust in God. On the other side is fear of what happens if you let go. And every single day, you wake up trying to balance both. You pray, but you still worry. You believe, but you still try to manage every outcome. You surrender with your words, but your heart keeps holding on tightly. That inner tension is what has been draining you. Chosen ones are wired differently. You feel things deeper. You think further ahead. You sense when something is shifting spiritually, even if nothing has changed physically yet. And because of that, you carry a weight that others don't. You feel responsible. Responsible to make the right move. Responsible not to mess up what God has promised. Responsible to stay strong even when you are tired. So you push yourself. You tell yourself to hold on a little longer. To endure a little more, to stay patient just a bit further. And while endurance is powerful, there comes a moment when endurance turns into resistance. Not resistance against God, but resistance against rest. Resistance against release. Resistance against trusting that God can handle what you no longer can. You didn't notice when the shift happened. It was subtle. At first, you were just being careful. Then you were being cautious. Then you were being protective. And before you knew it, you were trying to control things that were never meant to be carried by you in the first place. This is the inner war. You trust God, but you don't trust the unknown. You believe in His plan, but you fear the timing. You know He is faithful, but you still feel the need to guard yourself. And that contradiction creates mental noise. It creates spiritual tension. It keeps your nervous system alert even when there is no immediate danger. That's why you feel tired even after resting. That's why silence sometimes feels heavy instead of peaceful. That's why your mind keeps replaying scenarios you already prayed about. Let me tell you something gently, but clearly. God never asked you to fight yourself. The struggle you've been calling faith is actually the result of trying to stand in two positions at once. One foot in surrender, one foot in self-protection. And that position is not sustainable. It creates anxiety. It creates overthinking. It creates that quiet heaviness in your chest that you can't quite explain to anyone else. You've been trying to be strong for too long. Strength does not always mean holding on. Sometimes strength means loosening your grip. Sometimes strength means admitting that you have reached the end of what you can manage on your own. And chosen one, that is not failure. That is awareness. Think about this. Why do you think the battle feels so intense right now? Why does it feel like something is coming to a head? Why does it feel like you can't keep going the same way anymore? Because your soul knows something your mind has been resisting. Your soul knows that this season cannot be carried with force. It requires trust. And trust feels dangerous when you've been the one holding everything together for so long. You've learned how to survive by staying alert, by staying prepared, by staying guarded. And God is now asking you to live, not survive. That shift feels uncomfortable. Letting go feels like stepping into air when you're used to solid ground. Your mind asks, what if I fall? What if I lose something? What if I misunderstand God? What if I give in too soon? Those questions are not signs of weak faith. They are signs of a heart that cares deeply. But they are also signs that you have been carrying the weight of outcomes that were never yours to control. Chosen one, listen carefully. The inner war you've been fighting is not because you are disobedient. It is because you are at a transition point, a point where the old way of coping no longer works, but the new way hasn't fully settled in yet. This is the space between holding on and fully trusting, and that space is uncomfortable for everyone God calls deeper. You've been asking God for peace, but peace cannot enter where control still dominates. Peace is not something God adds on top of anxiety. Peace replaces anxiety when surrender is complete. That doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop carrying. There is a difference. Caring says, God, this matters to me. Carrying says, God, I'll handle it myself just in case you don't. And I know you don't mean it that way. I know your intentions are pure, but intention doesn't remove the burden. Only surrender does. This inner war has shown up as restlessness, as impatience with yourself, as moments where you feel disconnected from joy, even though nothing is technically wrong. It shows up when you feel like you're doing everything right, yet something still feels off. That's because alignment is not about effort. It's about agreement. Agreement between your faith and your actions. Agreement between your prayers and your posture. Agreement between what you say you believe and how tightly you hold on. God is not disappointed in you. He is not angry with you. He is not waiting to punish you for hesitating. He sees your heart. He sees how much you've tried. He sees how much you've endured quietly. But he also sees that you're tired. And that tiredness is not meant to be fixed by trying harder. It is meant to be healed by giving in. Not giving up. Giving in. Giving in to rest. Giving in to trust. Giving in to the truth that God does not need your anxiety to accomplish His will. This inner war is the signal, not of failure, but of readiness. A signal that you are standing at the edge of a new way of living with God. A way that is lighter. A way that is quieter. A way that doesn't require constant self-defense. You are not breaking down, you are loosening, and that is exactly where God begins to move. Stay with me, because now we need to talk about why God has been asking you, again and again, to finally give in. Section 3. Why God has been asking you to give in. Chosen one, this is where many people misunderstand God. They think that when God asks them to give in, He is asking them to lose something. They hear surrender and assume weakness. They hear release and imagine loss. But God has never asked His chosen ones to surrender to emptiness. He asks you to surrender to alignment. God has been asking you to give in because you have reached the limit of what human effort can accomplish in this season. Not because you are incapable, but because this next level cannot be accessed through force, intelligence, discipline, or endurance alone. It requires trust that goes beyond logic. You see, there are seasons where God allows effort to work, where strategy matters, where pushing forward produces results. But there are also seasons where effort becomes interference. And that is the season you are in right now. God has been nudging you, quietly at first. A sense of unease when you overthink. A heaviness when you try to force answers. A lack of peace when you plan too far ahead. Those were not signs of confusion. Those were signs of misalignment. You have been doing good things, but not always God's way. And that distinction matters. God is not asking you to stop caring about your future. He is asking you to stop micromanaging it. There is a difference. Caring keeps your heart engaged. Micromanaging keeps your spirit tense. God wants your heart open, not clenched. The reason surrender feels so hard for you is because you have learned to associate safety with control. Somewhere along the way, you realized that being alert kept you from being disappointed. Being prepared kept you from being hurt. Being in charge kept things from falling apart. And those coping mechanisms helped you survive earlier seasons. But survival is not the same as spiritual abundance. What once protected you is now restricting you. God has been asking you to give in because He can no longer move freely in the areas you insist on guarding. Not because He is limited, but because He honors free will. God does not wrestle control away from His children. He waits for permission. And permission does not come from words alone. It comes from posture. You can pray all day and still resist God if your posture says, "I trust you, but I need backup plans just in case." God hears the prayer, but He responds to the posture. This is why things have felt delayed, not denied. Delayed. God has not been withholding blessings. He has been waiting for space. Space where peace can settle. Space where clarity can land. Space where He does not have to compete with your anxiety. Chosen one, hear me clearly. God is not asking you to give in because you've done something wrong. He is asking you to give in because you've done everything you can. And continuing the same way will only create more exhaustion, not more progress. There comes a moment when faith must move from effort to trust, from striving to resting, from proving to believing. That transition is uncomfortable because it feels passive, but it is actually deeply active on a spiritual level. Giving in does not mean you stop praying. It means you stop panicking. Giving in does not mean you stop dreaming. It means you stop forcing timelines. Giving in does not mean you stop acting. It means you stop reacting from fear. God has been asking you to give in because He wants to lead, not just advise. But leadership requires followership. And followership requires letting go of the illusion that you need to see the whole path before taking the next step. You want clarity before obedience. God wants obedience before clarity. That is the tension. You've been asking God for answers, signs, confirmations, reassurance. And God has been saying, "Trust me. Walk with me. Let me handle what you cannot see." But trust feels risky when you've been responsible for holding things together for so long. Let me say something that may settle your heart. God is not offended by your questions. He is not threatened by your hesitation, but He cannot override your grip. When your hands are full of worry, there is no room to receive peace. This is why God has been repeating the same lesson in different forms, different situations, same theme, different people, same message, different seasons, same instruction. Give it to me. Not because you're weak, but because you're ready. You are standing at the edge of a shift that requires humility, not hustle. Humility to admit that you don't need to carry everything. Humility to accept that God's way may look quieter than you expected, slower than you hoped, less dramatic than your imagination, but far more stable. You've been taught that strong faith looks loud, but often the strongest faith is quiet. It doesn't argue with God, it doesn't negotiate outcomes, it doesn't demand explanations, it rests. And rest is not inactivity. Rest is trust in motion. God has been asking you to give in because He wants to restore your nervous system, not just your circumstances. He wants to heal the part of you that learned to stay tense to stay safe. He wants to teach you that safety comes from Him, not from vigilance. That's why peace has felt elusive. You cannot experience peace while rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You cannot feel joy while bracing for impact that God never intended. Giving in is the doorway to peace, not the consequence of peace. You don't give in because you feel calm. You feel calm because you give in. This is where many chosen ones get stuck. They wait for peace before they surrender. God asks for surrender before peace arrives. And that leap feels terrifying when you're used to certainty. But chosen one, listen to me with your spirit, not just your mind. God has never failed you when you trusted Him fully. The moments that hurt the most were the moments you tried to protect yourself from pain instead of trusting God through it. Control did not spare you from pain, it only prolonged the lesson. God is asking you to give in because the next season will require less effort and more agreement, less planning and more presence, less striving and more listening. You are not losing control, you are transferring it from limited hands to faithful hands, from anxious thoughts to divine wisdom, from self-reliance to God-dependence. And that transfer feels like death to the ego, but life to the soul. This is not about abandoning responsibility. It is about redefining it. Your responsibility is obedience. God's responsibility is outcome. You have been carrying God's part for too long, and God, in His mercy, is saying, "Let me take it now." Because what He is about to do cannot be managed by your old methods. It requires faith that rests, trust that listens, obedience that doesn't need guarantees. This is why He keeps asking you to give in, not to break you, but to free you. And now that you understand this, we need to talk about the cost of holding on for too long. Section 4. The cost of holding on too long. Chosen one, this is the part most people avoid talking about, not because it is harsh, but because it is honest. Holding on feels responsible, it feels mature, it feels like strength, and for a time, it may even look wise. But when God asks you to release something and you continue to grip it tightly, there is always a cost, not a punishment, a consequence. And that cost is not always obvious at first. You didn't lose everything overnight, you didn't collapse, you didn't fall apart. Instead, something quieter happened. Peace slowly slipped away, joy became harder to access, rest stopped feeling restorative. You kept going, but you stopped feeling fully alive while doing it. That is the cost. When you hold on too long, you don't necessarily break. You harden, you adapt to tension, you normalize stress. You tell yourself this is just how life is now. And chosen one, that is one of the most dangerous places to be. Not because you are weak, but because you become used to living without the fullness God intended for you. You begin to function without flourishing. Holding on too long costs clarity. When you insist on controlling outcomes, your vision narrows. You stop hearing God clearly because your mind is too loud with contingency plans. You pray, but you also rehearse. You listen, but you also second-guess. And over time, it becomes difficult to distinguish God's voice from your own anxiety. That confusion is not from God. Holding on too long also costs time. Not because God runs out of patience, but because certain seasons are meant to be entered, not postponed. There are moments when obedience opens doors quickly, and when obedience is delayed, the door does not always stay open the same way. God's plans are eternal, but the form they take in your life can change depending on your response. This is not to scare you, it is to wake you. Some opportunities require readiness more than effort. Some blessings require alignment more than endurance. And when you insist on carrying what God asked you to release, you delay what He is ready to give. Holding on too long costs emotional health. You become hyper-vigilant. You analyze everything. You prepare for disappointment, even in moments of peace. Your body stays tense, even when there is no immediate threat. And over time, your spirit forgets what it feels like to rest without guilt. You may not call it anxiety. You may call it responsibility. You may not call it fear. You may call it wisdom. But the fruit tells the truth. Peace has been replaced with pressure. Trust has been replaced with tension. Faith has been replaced with monitoring. And none of that was God's intention for you. There is also a relational cost. When you hold on too tightly, you become emotionally distant without meaning to. You guard your heart not just from pain, but from connection. You keep people at a safe distance. You listen, but you don't fully lean in. You love, but with conditions. Not because you are cold, but because you are tired. Chosen ones often become isolated, not because they want to be alone, but because carrying too much leaves little energy for intimacy. Holding on too long also costs spiritual sensitivity. When your hands are full, you miss subtle invitations from God. You miss gentle nudges. You miss quiet confirmations. Not because God stopped speaking, but because your grip was too tight to notice. God speaks most clearly in surrendered spaces. Let me say something that may be difficult to hear, but is said with care. Some of the frustration you've been feeling is not from opposition. It is from resistance. Resistance to letting go of what God has already outgrown in your life. Resistance to stepping into a lighter way of trusting Him. You have been faithful. But faithfulness without surrender eventually turns into self-reliance. And self-reliance, no matter how well-intentioned, always comes with strain. You've been asking God why things feel harder instead of easier, and God has been quietly answering, because you are still carrying what I asked you to place down. This does not make you disobedient, it makes you human. But chosen one, humanity is not your ceiling. Trust is. The longer you hold on, the more tired you become. And the more tired you become, the harder it feels to let go. That is how cycles form. Not cycles of sin, but cycles of strain. And God, in His mercy, interrupts those cycles with moments like this. Moments where everything inside you says, I can't keep doing this the same way. That feeling is not weakness. It is wisdom. There is also a spiritual cost that is rarely spoken about. When you hold on too long, you subtly communicate to yourself that God needs your help to succeed. Again, not consciously, not intentionally, but practically. And over time, that belief erodes confidence in God's sufficiency. You still believe in Him, but you stop fully relying on Him. And reliance is where peace lives. God never designed you to carry divine outcomes. He designed you to carry obedience. When you take on more than your portion, you exhaust yourself and restrict Him, not because He lacks power, but because He honors boundaries. God does not force blessings into clenched hands. Let me be clear. God is not waiting to punish you for holding on. He is waiting to relieve you. He is not frustrated with your hesitation. He is compassionate toward your fatigue, but compassion does not mean He will allow you to stay stuck. There are moments when God allows discomfort to increase, so that surrender becomes easier than resistance. That is where you are now. The cost of holding on too long is not that you lose God's love. You never will. The cost is that you delay experiencing His peace, His ease, His quiet confidence flowing through you instead of pressure weighing on you. You were never meant to live in constant tension. You were meant to walk with God, not brace against life. And the good news is this. The cost you've paid so far is not final. Nothing is ruined. Nothing is wasted. Awareness always comes before change. And right now, you are becoming aware. Aware that holding on has taken more than it has given. Aware that effort has reached its limit. Aware that something needs to shift. That awareness is grace. And now that you see the cost clearly, we need to talk about the moment you are standing in right now. The moment where God says, this is the crossroads. Now or never. Section 5. This is the crossroads moment. Now or never. Chosen one. This is not just another season. This is not another phase that will quietly pass if you wait long enough. This is a crossroads moment, and crossroads are different. They demand a decision, not tomorrow, not someday, but now. You can feel it, even if you can't fully explain it. Something inside you knows that the way you have been living, believing, coping, and holding on cannot continue the same way. It's not dramatic on the outside, but it is loud on the inside. The tension has reached a point where staying the same feels harder than changing. That is how you know you are at a crossroads. Crossroads moments don't come often. God does not rush people into them. He prepares them slowly, quietly, patiently. He lets you try your way. He lets you learn. He lets you carry things longer than He ever intended, not to burden you, but to teach you discernment. And then, when you are finally ready to see the truth without fear, He brings you here. Here is where effort stops working. Here is where control becomes heavy. Here is where faith must mature. Now or never does not mean God will abandon you if you hesitate. It means the invitation you are sensing right now is time-sensitive. Certain doors only open when obedience meets timing. Not panic, not perfection, timing. and your spirit knows the timing is now. You have likely been telling yourself, just a little more time, one more sign, one more confirmation, one more sense of certainty. But chosen one, certainty is not coming the way you want it to, because certainty is not what God is offering you here. He is offering you trust. This is the moment where God stops explaining and starts inviting you into a lighter way of living, inviting you into a quieter confidence, inviting you into a faith that does not need constant reassurance. Crossroads moments feel uncomfortable because both paths are visible. One path is familiar. You know how to survive there. You know how to cope there. You know how to manage your expectations there. The other path feels unfamiliar. It feels uncertain. It feels like stepping away from everything you used to feel safe. But let me tell you something clearly. Familiar does not mean faithful. Sometimes the familiar path is the one that keeps you stuck, not because it is wrong, but because it has already taught you everything it can. God is not asking you to abandon wisdom. He is asking you to stop confusing familiarity with obedience. At this crossroads, God is not asking you to do more. He is asking you to release more. Release old patterns, release old coping mechanisms, release the belief that you must stay alert to stay protected. This is where many chosen ones hesitate, because letting go feels like losing identity. You have identified yourself as the strong one, the responsible one, the one who holds everything together, the one who doesn't fall apart. And God is gently saying, I don't need you to be the strong one right now. I need you to be the trusting one. That shift feels threatening to the ego, but healing to the soul. Now or never is not about fear, it is about readiness. You are ready now in a way you were not before. You have seen enough. You have endured enough. You have tried enough. And God does not waste readiness. There are seasons where God teaches through building, and there are seasons where God teaches through releasing. You are in the releasing season, and releasing always feels like loss before it feels like freedom. But freedom is coming. If you delay this moment, life will not end. God will not stop loving you, but the lesson will repeat. The tension will return in another form. The invitation will come again, but it may not look the same. And each delay makes surrender feel heavier, not easier. This is why the moment feels intense. God is not pressuring you. He is clarifying. Clarifying that what worked before will not work now. Clarifying that effort cannot replace trust anymore. Clarifying that the next season will not respond to force. Chosen one, this crossroads is not about choosing between God and something else. It is about choosing between control and peace, between familiarity and freedom, between surviving and living. You already know which one you want. That's why your soul has been restless. That's why distraction no longer satisfies you. That's why surface-level encouragement doesn't land the same way it used to. You are being called deeper, not louder. Now or never means this. Now is the moment to agree with God instead of negotiating with Him. Now is the moment to stop bracing for impact and start resting in trust. Now is the moment to give God full access, not partial cooperation. And if you don't, if you keep holding back, life will continue to press on the same sensitive areas until you are willing to listen. Not because God is cruel, but because He is committed to your growth. God loves you too much to let you stay half-surrendered. This crossroads also explains why things around you may feel unstable. God often allows external uncertainty to expose internal attachments. When what you rely on begins to shake, it reveals what you trust the most. And right now, God is lovingly asking you to shift that trust fully onto Him. This is not the moment to analyze every possible outcome. This is not the moment to seek consensus from people who do not carry your calling. This is not the moment to wait for perfect emotional readiness. This is the moment to say, God, I don't fully understand, but I trust you enough to move. And movement here is not physical. It is internal. It is a decision, a posture, a release. Chosen one, hear me with clarity and calm. If you choose surrender now, you will not lose yourself. You will find yourself. If you choose trust now, you will not fall apart. You will come together. If you choose to give in now, you will not become weak. You will become free. This is the crossroads moment, and it feels heavy because it matters. God is not asking you to rush. He is asking you not to resist, because on the other side of this decision is not chaos. It is order, not confusion, but peace, not loss, but alignment. And now that you understand the moment you are standing in, we need to talk about what actually happens when you finally give in. Section 6. What happens when you finally give in? Chosen one, let me calm your heart right here, because what you have imagined surrender to be is far heavier than what it actually becomes. You have been picturing chaos, loss, confusion, vulnerability. But when you finally give in to God, the first thing that happens is not disruption. It is relief. Not loud relief, quiet relief. It arrives subtly, like a deep breath you didn't realize you were holding. Like your shoulders dropping without effort, like your mind finally slowing down enough to rest in a single thought instead of racing through 10. When you finally give in, the pressure to perform disappears. You stop feeling like every decision carries the weight of destiny. You stop feeling like one wrong move will ruin everything. That fear has been exhausting you more than you know. Giving in does not remove responsibility. It removes panic from responsibility. The second thing that happens is clarity, not instant answers, not a detailed roadmap, but a clearer sense of what matters and what doesn't. Things that once consumed your mental energy suddenly feel smaller, not because they changed, but because you did. You begin to see what God has been doing beneath the surface all along. You start recognizing that delays were protection, that closed doors were direction, that confusion was preparation, and that the silence you feared was actually God teaching you how to listen without demanding. When you give in, your spirit becomes quieter, and that quiet creates space. Space for discernment, space for peace, space for God to speak without competing with your anxiety. This is where many chosen ones are surprised. They expect fireworks. Instead, they find stillness. They expect intensity. Instead, they find steadiness. They expect to feel smaller. Instead, they feel supported. Giving in does not make you passive. It makes you present. You become less reactive, less defensive, less rushed. You stop making decisions from urgency and start making them from alignment. And alignment always feels calmer than urgency. Another thing that happens is emotional healing. Not dramatic healing, not emotional collapse, but gradual unwinding. Old tensions begin to loosen. Old fears stop showing up as loudly. You notice that situations that once triggered you no longer have the same power. That is not numbness. That is freedom. When you give in, God begins to carry what you were never meant to hold. Outcomes, timelines, reactions of others, unknowns. You don't stop caring about them. You simply stop carrying them in your nervous system. This is why peace feels physical when it finally arrives. It settles into your body, not just your thoughts. You sleep differently. You breathe differently. You respond differently. You are still you, just without the constant internal pressure. Another thing that happens is trust becomes natural instead of forced. You no longer have to convince yourself that God is in control. You feel it. And that feeling changes how you move through life. You stop scanning for danger. You stop rehearsing worst-case scenarios. You stop assuming the burden is always yours. Trust stops being an idea and becomes an experience. This is where joy quietly returns. Not the kind that depends on circumstances being perfect, but the kind that exists even when things are unfinished, even when answers are still forming, even when life is still unfolding. Joy returns because resistance leaves. You may not notice it immediately, but one day you will catch yourself smiling without a reason, or feeling grateful without forcing it, or being present without worrying about what comes next. That is the fruit of surrender. When you give in, your relationship with God changes. You stop approaching Him like a problem solver and start relating to Him like a guide. You stop interrogating and start listening. You stop negotiating and start trusting. Your prayers change. They become shorter, they become calmer, they become more honest. Instead of asking God to fix everything, you ask Him to lead you, and leadership is exactly what He has been waiting to offer. Another powerful shift happens here. You stop confusing peace with stagnation. Peace does not mean nothing is happening. It means what is happening is no longer harming you internally. God can move faster when you are at peace. An anxious heart resists God's pace. A surrendered heart flows with it. When you give in, you also begin to recognize divine alignment more clearly. Opportunities appear without force. Conversations unfold naturally. Doors open without struggle. Not because life becomes easy, but because you stop fighting what God is already arranging. Effort is replaced by flow. You will still act. You will still decide. You will still show up. But you will do so without the constant inner argument, without the fear of missing something, without the need to control every outcome. This is the life chosen ones are meant to live, a life where faith feels like support, not strain. Let me address a fear you may be carrying quietly. You may be afraid that if you give in, you will lose your edge, that you will become complacent, that you will stop striving and end up falling behind. That fear comes from a misunderstanding of how God works. God does not reward anxiety. He rewards obedience. You don't need fear to stay sharp. You need clarity. And clarity comes from trust. When you give in, your decisions become cleaner. You waste less energy second-guessing. You conserve emotional strength. You stop reacting to every stimulus, and that makes you more effective, not less. You begin to move with intention instead of impulse. Another thing that happens is identity settles. You stop trying to prove that you are chosen. You stop measuring yourself against others. You stop seeking validation from outcomes. You simply know who you are, and that knowing is grounding. Chosen ones who give in stop chasing affirmation because they no longer doubt their assignment. They stop explaining themselves because they no longer need approval. They stop overextending because they no longer confuse exhaustion with faithfulness. This is maturity. God has been inviting you into this maturity, not to take something from you, but to give something to you. Stability, peace, confidence that does not depend on circumstances. When you finally give in, God does not overwhelm you with change. He stabilizes you for what is coming. He strengthens your inner foundation so that when blessings arrive, they do not destabilize you. When responsibility increases, it does not crush you. When attention comes, it does not distort you. Surrender prepares you to receive without losing yourself. And perhaps the most beautiful thing that happens is this. You realize you were never alone in the struggle. God was never watching from a distance, waiting to see if you would fail. He was walking with you, waiting for the moment you would stop carrying what He already promised to hold. Giving in is not the end of your strength. It is the end of unnecessary strain. It is not the loss of control. It is the restoration of peace. And now that you understand what happens when you finally give in, the next question becomes important. How do you do this without fear, without confusion, without feeling like you're stepping into the dark? That is what we need to talk about next. Section 7. How to give in without fear. Chosen one. This is where your heart needs gentleness, not pressure. Because many people hear surrender and imagine falling apart. They imagine losing direction. They imagine becoming passive or confused. But giving in to God is not a leap into darkness. It is a step into guidance. Fear comes when you think surrender means abandoning discernment. It does not. Surrender means shifting where your confidence lives. Instead of trusting your ability to anticipate every outcome, you trust God's ability to lead you through each moment as it comes. The first way you give in without fear is by releasing the need to understand everything before you move. You have been conditioned to believe that clarity must come first, that peace must arrive before obedience. But spiritual maturity reverses that order. Obedience creates clarity. Trust creates peace. You don't need the whole picture. You need the next faithful step. Fear often comes from imagining future scenarios that have not happened and may never happen. Giving in begins when you stop projecting yourself into the future and anchor yourself in the present. God does not meet you in imagined outcomes. He meets you in real moments. Ask yourself gently, what is God asking of me right now? Not next year, not 10 steps ahead, but now. Often the answer is simple. Rest. Pause. Stop forcing. Speak honestly. Let go of a timeline. Step away from something that no longer brings peace. Fear loses power when surrender becomes practical instead of abstract. The second way you give in without fear is by trusting God's character more than your emotions. Your emotions are real, but they are not always reliable guides. Fear can feel convincing. Anxiety can sound logical, but neither has authority over your calling. God's character is consistent even when your feelings fluctuate. When fear arises, instead of arguing with it, remind yourself who God has been to you. Recall moments where He provided without explanation, where He protected without warning, where He guided without noise. Those memories are anchors. They remind your nervous system that trust has a history. Giving in does not mean you stop feeling fear. It means fear stops making decisions for you. Another important step is learning to release control in layers, not all at once. God rarely asks for everything at the same time. He asks for one area, one habit, one mindset, one attachment. When you release that, peace follows, and that peace prepares you to release the next thing. Fear tells you surrender will be overwhelming. God designs it to be gradual. You also give in without fear by allowing rest to be an act of obedience. This is difficult for chosen ones. You are used to effort, used to endurance, used to pushing through. But there is a kind of rest that is not laziness. It is alignment. Rest says, I trust God enough to stop striving. Rest says, I believe He can work without my anxiety. Rest says, I am safe enough to pause. When you rest intentionally, fear begins to quiet. Your body learns that you are no longer in danger. Your mind slows. Your spirit becomes more receptive. This is why God often invites His chosen ones into stillness before transition. Stillness is not delay, it is preparation. Another way to give in without fear is to stop rehearsing explanations for people who don't need to understand your obedience. Fear often comes from worrying how others will perceive your choices. Will they think you are giving up? Will they misunderstand your silence? Will they question your faith? You are not called to be understood by everyone. You are called to be aligned with God. When you stop managing perception, fear loosens its grip. You realize that obedience does not require approval, and peace does not require permission. Giving in also means learning to pray differently. Not longer prayers, not more emotional prayers, but more honest ones. Instead of asking God to fix everything, tell Him where you are afraid. Tell Him where you feel resistance. Tell Him where you don't know how to let go yet. God does not require polished surrender. He responds to honest surrender. Fear fades when you stop pretending to be stronger than you feel. Another important practice is to stop measuring progress by visible results. Fear grows when you expect immediate confirmation. But surrender often works invisibly at first. God shifts things beneath the surface before you see external change. Trust the unseen work. Just because you don't feel different immediately does not mean nothing is happening. Peace often settles slowly, like sediment falling in water. At first it still looks cloudy, but over time, clarity emerges. Giving in without fear also means allowing yourself to grieve what you are releasing. Even good things can be hard to let go of. Old roles, old dreams, old expectations. God does not ask you to deny that loss. He invites you to process it with Him. Grief does not cancel surrender. It completes it. Fear diminishes when you feel emotionally supported instead of emotionally rushed. Chosen one of the most powerful things you can do is remind yourself daily that God is not testing you. He is teaching you. He is not waiting for you to fail. He is walking with you as you learn a new way of trusting. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not missing something essential. You are exactly where you need to be to learn this lesson gently instead of painfully. Giving in without fear ultimately comes down to this. You stop asking, "What if this goes wrong?" And you start asking, "What if God carries this better than I ever could?" That question changes everything. Fear shrinks when trust expands, not because you force it, but because you practice it. One decision at a time, one release at a time, one breath at a time. You don't need to be brave. You need to be willing. Willing to trust without guarantees. Willing to rest without guilt. Willing to follow without full clarity. And chosen one, willingness is enough for God to work with. Now that you know how to give in without fear, your heart is ready for something important. A final reminder. A closing truth. A piece that settles everything we've talked about. Let's bring this home. Section 8. Conclusion. The peace you've been searching for. Chosen one, let me leave you with this truth and let it settle gently into your spirit. You were never created to live in constant tension. You were never meant to wake up every day bracing yourself for what might go wrong. That weight you've been carrying was never proof of strength. It was simply proof that you cared deeply. And God sees that. But now, it is time to rest. Not because you have failed, not because you are giving up, but because you have reached the point where trust must replace strain. You have done what you could. You have learned what you needed to learn. And now God is inviting you into peace, not as a reward for perfection, but as a gift of alignment. You don't need to fight anymore. You don't need to prove anything anymore. You don't need to hold everything together anymore. Giving in does not make you less. It makes you lighter. It allows God to do what only He can do, while you finally breathe again. This moment reached you at the right time because your soul is ready, even if your mind is still catching up. So as you leave this message, don't rush. Don't overthink. Just rest in the knowing that God is with you, guiding you, steadying you, and carrying what you were never meant to carry alone. Before you go, chosen ones, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, tap the bell icon so you never miss a message meant for you, and share this with another chosen one who needs peace today. And comment 777 in the comments as a sign that you are aligned, surrendered, and ready to walk forward with God without fear. You are safe, you are guided, and you are exactly where you need to be. Go in peace.